You are born on a dirt floor, and from that first gasp, every heartbeat is a debt no Lord intends to pardon. Stay, and you will see why in the Middle Ages, death was the only luxury the poor could almost afford. Forget what the movies whispered about cobblestone charm and candlelit banquets. Close your eyes and feel the mud instead. It clings to your ankles like iron, turns every heartbeat into a sullen drum. You inhale smoke from the hearth and taste rot. You exhale frost that hangs in the rafters like quiet knives. This is not romance. This is survival by surrender. You are born on a dirt floor, and the floor never lets you go. The chill crawls into your bones at the first cry and never leaves. Your mother bites a stick to keep from screaming while she brings you into a world already too loud with pain. The midwife mutters a prayer, not for life, but for a quick passing, because lingering costs more than burial. Living costs flesh. Dying costs only a ditch and a shovel. You measure time in wounds. Dawn is the blister that bursts. Noon is the lash across your shoulders. Dusk is the ache of kneeling over turnips that refuse to ripen. Night is the cold that presses you flat, stealing breath just slowly enough to let morning find you still shivering. Each sunrise is not a promise. It is a threat, dressed in pale light. The church bell rings to remind you that even God keeps accounts. The Lord's steward arrives with a ledger thick as a tombstone, reading debts that began before you could speak. Grain you never tasted, wool you never wore, hope you never held. He smiles the way a wolf smiles at a lamb too weak to flee. You pay with the bruise on your cheek, with the stoop in your spine, with the child you will bury when fever drinks her dry. Nights ride past and do not dismount. Their armor blinds you for a heartbeat, then mud dulls the shine, and the moment passes. Songs call them heroes. You call them weather. Unstoppable, indifferent. They trample the field you planted. They carry your firewood for their camp. They leave horse droppings richer than your dinner. You swallow envy and keep your head low because steel does not reason. You have never tasted pure water. The stream carries the village's refuse and returns it as sickness in every cup. A cough becomes a sentence, a rash becomes a curse, a toothache becomes a grave. The body decays while it still breathes, then breathes a little longer just to spite mercy. Life insists on itself, but only to prove how heavy living can be. History books speak of castles, crusades, cathedrals that scrape the sky. They forget the hovel, where rain falls through the thatch and rats feast in your sibling's cradle. They praise the era's faith and chivalry. They omit the smell. They omit the sound a belly makes when it pleads for bread and receives broth thin as tears. Listen. The drum you hear is not a festival. It is a heartbeat slowing in the chest of a man crushed by a cartwheel. No physician will arrive. No statute will protect. Only the earth will claim him, the same earth that waits beneath your own stumbling feet. Soil is the final landlord. The rent is always collected. Living here, now, inside this unlit century, is an act of prolonged dying. Every breath is borrowed. Every step is taxed. Every heartbeat is a confession that pain has not yet won. You endure, not because you hope, but because quitting is a luxury the poor cannot afford. Forget courtly love, shining armor, troubadour songs. Here is the rough edge of history that slices skin and pride alike. Stay. Look closer. In the next hours, you will walk beside those who carried this weight from cradle to clay. Their voices are low, their eyes are tired, their stories are true. Textbooks stay silent about them. We will not. Spring arrives without color. The thaw turns lanes into rivers of muck, churning with manure and corpse runoff from the pest house up the hill. You wade because there is no bridge, your toes numb, your thoughts dull. The stench clings longer than sunlight and crawls into the straw where you lie, turning dreams sour. Summer offers heat, not harvest. The field yields weeds taller than grain, each stalk a sneer. You bend, you bleed, you braid nettles into rope because hemp is scarce, and the welts stay angry for weeks. Flies settle on your eyelids while you sleep sitting upright to keep coughing children semi-breathing. Laughter shrinks to a rumor carried on the wind, told by travelers you will never become. Autumn pretends to be generous. Wagons groan under barley and rye, destined for someone else's granary. You watch the last sack vanish beyond the gatehouse. The steward pats the mule, not you, and calls the season blessed. You smile with cracked lips, because showing anger is treason, and silence is safer than truth. Winter is king. Frost lances through the thatch, settles on your blanket like a second poverty. You burn dung because wood is taxed, and the smoke drills tunnels in your lungs. A neighbor's cough turns to blood, turns to hush, turns to gone. The village priest mutters that suffering refines the soul, the way fire tempers steel. You wonder whether souls scatter like ash, when bodies burn in a pit too shallow to remember names. Children here grow old by 8 winters, knees twisted by rickets, spines bowed like unstrung bows. They carve rag dolls from rotwood, baptize them, hunger, fever, fear, then lose them beneath the same mud that swallows their footprints. Childhood ends when the first tooth rots out, when the first chore draws blood, when the first snow tastes of regret. Hope exists, but only as a story you repeat the way others recite prayers. You whisper of distant lands where wheat stands tall and coins fall like copper rain. The tale warms no one, yet you nurse it because ember is better than ice. You hide it from the reeve, from the tanner, from the priest. They claim hope breeds rebellion. You know it merely keeps the heart beating a little. This landscape does not hate you. Hatred requires focus. The world simply does not notice you. The sky hangs heavy with soot. The river limps past carrying secrets to the sea. The forest looms with wolves that will eat the cheeks of your dead before the grave freezes shut. Indifference is the ruling monarch, crowned in silence. Still you rise. Still you sew a torn shoe with gut string. Still you press a kiss to a fevered brow, though lips crack and blood beads. Still you kneel in church and mouth words half believed, because ritual is the only shield a mind possesses when flesh offers none. Persistence becomes identity. Despair becomes routine. Life continues, thin and sharp as a blacksmith's file, scraping away anything soft. Remember the pageants you studied, the illuminated manuscripts shimmering with gold leaf. They float above this mud like distant constellations, pretty and unreachable. Between their perfect letters lurk empty bellies, splintered ribs, eyes filmed with cataract at 30 summers. You hold those books now, with clean hands, beneath safe light. Do not look away. The margin glows because someone else labored in darkness. No one will carve your name on parchment. No minstrel will stitch your sorrow into song. Yet without your blistered hands, no stone would rise, no harvest would feed, no altar would shine. The kingdom rests on your silence. The future forgets you by design. So listen, just once, to the voice history buried beneath castles and cathedrals. Feel the weight of years press like a millstone against the chest. Taste the hunger that sharpened every word spoken in prayer. Smell the smoke that stained each memory until it turned the color of funerals. Understand that living was harder than dying, and dying was the easier road no one was allowed to take. This is the shadow side of the Middle Ages. No glory, no marvel, only the slow burn of bodies pledged to toil. In the next chapter, you will walk deeper, hand in hand with those who never had hands free. The textbook stayed silent. We will not. Edwin draws his first breath on a night when frost lies like glass upon the thatch. The midwife presses him to his mother's chest and whispers a psalm without melody, already listening for silence more than for life. His mother smells of sweat and soil and fear, yet she smiles, because crying wastes strength she will soon need again. The hut is half mud, half timber, no wider than the reach of two outstretched arms. A single rush dip burns low, smearing the air with tallow. There is no cradle, only a patch of stale straw softened by goat hair. Edwin's father has traded a day of labor for that goat hair. The debt will linger longer than the scent. The village calls this season winter, but seasons mean little to those without proper walls. Cold does not wait for solstice. It seeps in whenever it wills. Edwin's mother wraps him in linen too thin for warmth, yet too precious to soil. She fingers its frayed edge as if it holds a promise, though she knows cloth cannot bargain with fate. By morning, snow drifts against the shutters. A gust finds every crack. Each time wind sighs, the flame trembles, and Edwin's mother recites a fragment of a saint's legend, hoping words can weave a barrier the boards cannot. Edwin survives that first night, then the next. Survival becomes routine. He learns to crawl among chickens that roost indoors for warmth. Their droppings crust against the hard-packed earth. The smell catches in his throat, but smell is older than memory. It becomes childhood's flavor. When Edwin totters upright, his father ties a leather thong around his waist and loops the other end to a roof beam. The tether keeps the boy from the hearth, where soup hisses thin as rainwater. No one calls it cruel. Soup is all they own, more fragile than the child. At 3 winters, Edwin chews bread black with rye mold and learns that chewing is work. His teeth ache, though they barely protrude. He eats anyway, because hunger outranks pain. Poplar leaves stew in a pot when grain fails. The leaves pass through the body unchanged, green as they entered, but they fill the hollow long enough to walk back to the fields. Flavor is a concept reserved for holy days. Even then, blessed bread tastes of wood ash. Edwin listens to older boys swear they remember feast days filled with venison. He decides they must be liars or fools. Dreams that sweet cannot exist in the world he inhabits. Clothing is a patchwork of regrets. A tunic cut from burlap once held oats. It rubs his shoulders raw, weaving thin scabs that crack each dawn. Laces break and are replaced by nettle fibers that sting into welts. Boots are fantasies worn by reeves and priests. Edwin's first memory of snow includes the shocking white of his own toes. They burn, then numb, then burn anew each time he thaws by the hearthstones. Frostbite becomes ordinary, a yearly visitor like Lent. Sleep is negotiation, never rest. Nights belong to vermin. Fleas trill beneath the straw. Lice colonize the seams of every garment. Rats nibble candle stubs, and if the family forgets to hang stores, the fingers of infants. Edwin learns to lie motionless, breath shallow, so as not to wake hunger inside the rodents. Dreams come in fragments. A river without leeches. a sky without smoke, a loaf without mold. Each dawn shows the lie, but the dream returns because despair is dull without contrast. Fear shapes his world more surely than wood or stone. Fear of the steward who rides in twice each moon with dogs trained to find hidden grain. Fear of the priest who reads sins aloud while holding a box for offerings. Fear of the bailiff who counts labor days like a miser counts silver. Above all, fear of sickness. Coughs echo in the hut as winter deepens. When a neighbor's child coughs blood, mothers smear ash across their door lintels as if charcoal can ward plague. Edwin watches them and wonders whether ash can drown sound, because the coughing never stops. It only changes throats. By 7 winters, Edwin walks the ridge of the plow behind his father. The harness bites the oxen. The handle bites his palms. Soil spits stones that jar the blade and lurch the plowshare sideways. Each jerk shoots pain up Edwin's thin arms. His father curses gently, as though the ground might listen. They pray for straight furrows, for mild weather, for a harvest spared by mildew. Prayer costs no coin, yet Edwin learns it still exacts a toll. Hope. Every season demands fresh hope to trade for another chance. Hope renews itself, but weaker each time, like tin hammered too thin. The manor looms on the hill, stones pale as moonlight, banners fluttering in colors Edwin has never touched. On saint days, the Lord's daughter rides past, curls shining, cheeks warm behind an ermine hood. Edwin digs his toes into mud as she passes, half wishing to be invisible, half wishing she might look his way and see something human beneath the grime. She never does. Her eyes skim over peasants, the way swallows skim pond water, barely rippling the surface. Edwin decides nobility must see the world through polished glass, clear but distant. Inside the manor kitchens, meat sizzles each noon. The scent drifts downhill to the fields, a ghost made of fat and herbs. Edwin inhales, stomach twisting. He has tasted meat thrice in memory. A sparrow he trapped, a scrap of offal from the slaughter yard, and once, during plague, the leg of a pig found dead in a ditch. The steward turned a blind eye that day. Dying men make poor tenants. Yet the taste lingers, equal parts salt and danger. Edwin fears craving more than starvation, because craving leads to theft, and theft leads to the gallows. Pain accompanies every task, like a twin shadow. Blisters burst, fill with soil, fester. A splinter lodges beneath a fingernail. Pus swells until the nail loosens. Edwin's father teaches him to heat an iron nail and lance the wound. The relief is short, the scar permanent. Bruises bloom purple, then yellow, mapping the body like a cartographer of labor. Some nights, Edwin wonders how skin remembers its original hue. Loss is constant, yet grief is rationed. When Edwin's mother loses an infant to flux, she weeps one evening, then returns to work at dawn. Burial costs labor they cannot spare. The priest reads a psalm over a mound no larger than a loaf. Edwin kneels because others kneel. He hears his mother's breath catch, but her eyes remain dry. The well of tears is not endless. Coin runs out, and so do sobs. Fatigue dulls thought, yet thought remains enough to notice contrast. Edwin glimpses the Lord's hall during tax tally. Tapestries blaze with saints and battles, colors louder than any hymn. Candles line the walls like captive stars, pooling light on trenchers heavy with lamb shank and sugared almond. Servants flit like silent birds. Edwin's stomach cramps, but another ache gnaws deeper. The knowledge that such bounty exists within sight yet beyond reach. Envy becomes a second hunger, unsated by turnip or dream. One midsummer, Edwin's father limps home with a leg gashed by scythe. The wound festers sweetly, stinking of spoiled fruit. Flies gather. The local barber applies a poultice of honey and crushed thyme. Edwin watches his father's face as blades bite flesh to drain corruption. No scream, only a grind of teeth. Courage here is wordless endurance. The leg heals crooked, the man walks bent. Edwin inherits the heavier share of plow work. He does not resent, he adapts. Adaptation is the only inheritance the poor can guarantee. The priest preaches that labor ennobles the soul. Edwin wonders aloud whether the Lord's soul must be most exalted, given how many hands labor for him. The remark earns a cuff to the ear so sharp that ringing replaces thought. He learns another lesson. Speech can be costlier than silence. Words become coins. He spends them sparingly. Storms flatten barley just before harvest. The steward orders gleaning crews into the mire to salvage what can be saved. Edwin wades chest deep in water, cutting heads of grain with a rusted blade. Leeches latch onto his thighs. He plucks them off, watching dark threads of blood snake through brown floodwater. Each stalk rescued feels heavier than iron. At dusk, the steward tallies bundles and deducts a tenth for dampness spoilage. Edwin's share shrinks like cloth boiled too hot. Hunger claims the difference. Autumn fairs bring minstrels and peddlers. Edwin hears songs of distant courts where fountains run with wine and walls glimmer with silver. He almost laughs. Wine, to him, is the thin wash priests serve at Mass. Yet the melody lingers, bright as stolen jewelry, hinting that somewhere beyond the horizon, vision is not confined to hunger and mud. The peddler also sells charms against plague carved from horn. Edwin strokes one, but the cost equals a month of grain. He steps back. Faith must serve where coin fails. The Lord's daughter weds a knight from another shire. The village lines the road while banners wave. Edwin's tunic, recently rinsed in the stream, still smells of algae, but he stands straight. The bride passes in a litter curtained with velvet. Sweet musk drifts in her wake. Edwin tastes envy so thick it coats his tongue. He will never ride, never own velvet, never leave footprints on marble floors. He grips the roadside nettles until his palms welt, punishment for daring to dream. Winter again, always too soon. Fuel runs low. Edwin and his sister creep into the forest edge to gather fallen branches, though the forest is technically the Lord's domain. Caught wood gathering once, they lose half their harvest in fines. Caught twice, they risk flaying. Each creak of twig feels louder than thunder. They drag bundles home, breath fogging, fingers splintered. The fire burns a night longer. They decide risk is lighter than dying cold. Pox visits that same winter. Spots bloom on Edwin's sister's cheeks. Fever follows. Delirium dances behind her eyelids. The priest brings holy water and leaves as soon as ritual allows. Inside the hut, the air thickens with sour sweat. Edwin wipes her brow with a rag washed in snowmelt. She mutters of angels in coarse tunics. On the sixth dawn, the fever breaks. The cost, scars pitting her once smooth face, eyesight blurred, childhood shortened further. Survival always arrives with an invoice. Spring promises renewal and delivers mud. Edwin digs drainage ditches through fields that suck at his ankles. Each spadeful releases the smell of decay. Frogs croak among rushes, loud with life no tax can steal. Edwin envies their indifference. Frogs have no steward, no tithe, no conscience. They merely exist, thriving or dying without ledger or sermon. By his 16th summer, Edwin's shoulders broaden. Strength becomes currency. He spends it daily. The reeve notices and hires him to repair the manor palisade. For 1 week, Edwin labors within sight of stained glass windows. At noon, he receives a trencher of spiced mutton too rich for his gut. He eats until sweat beads his brow, then retches behind a yew hedge, body unaccustomed to fat. Still, he licks grease from his fingers, memorizing the taste for leaner days. Payment comes as coin, gleaming under sunlight. He holds it like a miracle, then hands half to his mother and offers the rest to the priest for prayers over his buried siblings. Coin vanishes. Hunger stays. Edwin wonders whether miracles require larger offerings. One evening, thunderheads gather purple and green. Lightning strikes the thatch of a neighboring hut, fire consuming roof and hope alike. Villagers form a desperate chain of wet sacks and wooden pails. Water fails to quench fury. Sparks leap from straw to straw. Edwin flings himself into smoke, dragging a crippled elder clear just before the rafters collapse. His reward is a burn along his forearm, angry and bubbling. The barber sears the blister with hot iron, explaining that one pain can chase out another. Edwin bites down on leather and discovers the wisdom of that paradox. Rumor reaches the village. The king has launched a new levy for war across the sea. No peasant knows which sea, only that more tax will follow. Edwin's father shrugs, spine twisted like wind-fallen oak. He speaks a truth so simple it cuts. When they are done bleeding one country, they squeeze the next. Edwin says nothing, but a seed takes root. He imagines land where the poorest till soil for themselves, not for unseen lords. Imagination is dangerous fertilizer. Hope sprouts again, stubborn. Edwin meets a peddler, selling scraps of parchment inscribed with fragments of scripture. The peddler claims reading wards the soul. Edwin barters a hen's egg for a single scrap. Symbols dance like tiny bones across the page. The peddler teaches him the shape of one word: bread. Edwin traces it with a grimy finger, mouthing the sound. Power stirs, small but real. If words can be owned, perhaps destiny can be rewritten, letter by letter. He hides the scrap inside his tunic, close to skin, a secret flame. Lent arrives. The priest exhorts everyone to embrace suffering. Edwin wonders what other embrace they know. Food shrinks to roots, water to thin gruel, voices to whispers. Yet the manor hosts a feast for visiting clergy. Spices scent the air. Music drifts down the hill. Edwin kneels in evening prayer, while his stomach knots. He imagines the taste of cinnamon, the glow of candles. Envy and devotion collide until both feel like the same ache. Another plague wave rolls through in late summer. This strain kills faster, kinder almost. Edwin digs graves until his palms blister anew. Shallow pits, quick prayers, lime to mask stench. His best friend Thomas, a boy who once taught Edwin how to snare rabbits, collapses mid-stride, black swellings already blooming. Edwin sits with him through the night. Thomas loses speech at dusk, loses breath near dawn. Edwin closes his lids, covers face with cloth, and resumes digging. Earth opens, earth closes. Life continues. The monotony of loss becomes a rhythm steadier than heartbeat. Contrast never ceases. The Lord's new winepress arrives, shining, imported. Peasants gather to unload it under supervision. Edwin shoulders beams heavier than his own weight. Splinters score his cheek. The steward praises the machinery's promise of sweeter wine. No mention of sweeter lives. Edwin wipes sweat and blood in silence. Machines serve those who own them. Men serve both. In the evenings, Edwin's mother hums a tune older than the kingdom. Her voice husky, but melody gentle. She braids rushes into mats, each twist a memory of hands now absent. Edwin watches, eyes stinging from smoke and fatigue. In that dim glow, he sees resilience painted across her lined face. Survival is an art, and she is master artisan. Edwin dreams once more of distant lands, not of castles, but of fields he can call his own, where grain does not vanish into tithe barns, where bread remains at table until hunger sleeps. Dawn shreds the dream, yet he holds a fragment, a lone word on crumpled parchment pressed to his chest. Bread. A prayer, a promise, a rebellion contained in 5 letters. Morning calls him to the plow, to the whip of rain against raw skin, to the endless negotiation with soil and fate. He shoulders the yoke, not because he is resigned, but because endurance may yet forge a path unseen. Beneath mud-caked feet, seeds lie hidden, waiting for light. Edwin steps forward. The furrow opens. Behind him, the earth folds closed, burying yesterday's pain, sheltering tomorrow's fragile hope. So one life unfolds, harsh and unadorned. Yet within Edwin's stooped frame echo the aches of multitudes. Every blister carries a chorus. Every heartbeat drums for countless hearts long stilled. His silence speaks for millions whom history footnotes as peasants, villains, serfs. Look closely at him, and you will glimpse them all. Men and women bent over the same soil, breathing the same smoke, fearing the same lash. Through Edwin's eyes, you meet their hunger. Through his scars, you trace their crucible. Through his stubborn steps, you feel the weight that kept an empire standing. This is no singular tragedy. It is the ordinary cruelty of an age measured not by kings, but by the backs that bore them. Edwin's path is narrow, muddy, endless. Yet each footprint inscribes a testament more honest than any charter. When chronicles trumpet battles and coronations, remember that between every line lies a man like Edwin, shoulders bowed, spirit unbroken. His story is the marrow of the Middle Ages. His pain, their pain, is the price of progress we later inherit without counting the cost. Watch him now, hoe in hand, eyes on the horizon where sun bleeds through cloud. He pauses, inhales air thick with manure and morning mist, then bends again to the row. The camera of your mind stays inches from his face. Sweat beads on his brow. Dust maps lines of exhaustion. Yet behind those eyes flickers something fierce, almost luminous. Not hope, perhaps, but the primitive ember of longing that refuses extinction. That ember glows across centuries, carried by bodies broken yet unbeaten. It warms the future even as it scorches the present. Stay with Edwin a moment longer. Hear the rasp of his breath, the whisper of wind through barley, the distant clang of the manor bell. Feel the heartbeat against ribs lined with old fractures. Know that each thump marks a victory over despair. Know that when he straightens and wipes his mouth with the back of a cracked hand, the smallest smile ghosts across his lips. Tomorrow may wound him anew, yet today he still stands. In that stance, the poor of 1,000 years claim their moment of grace, unseen by chroniclers, but indelible as the soil beneath their nails. Hunger comes first, gnawing at dawn before cocks crow. By midsummer, the barley has spoiled in the ear, struck by a mold that blackens the kernel and turns bread into poison. Edwin breaks his fast on boiled nettles, their sting tamed by long simmering, their bitterness intact. The broth coats nothing. It slides through an empty gut like water through a cracked jug. He tells himself the season will improve. This could have been the end, but... A cough opens next. It begins in the throat of Father Ambrose, the priest who blesses the fields. His voice, once ironclad with sermons about holy endurance, rasps into silence within a week. Spots stipple his chest, lungs flood, breath rattles like stones in a bucket. Villagers mark their doors with soot crosses, yet the pest still prowls. Edwin's mother fetches water for the dying priest. She returns fever bright, cheeks crimson as winter berries. 2 nights later, her pulse slows beneath Edwin's hand. He listens for one final flutter. It never comes. This could have been the end, but the steward arrives on the same morning, riding a gelding fat on oats no peasant has tasted in months. He tallies rents, demands arrears, cites a royal levy for distant wars. Grief cannot excuse debt. Tears wet the ledger and disappear unmentioned. Edwin surrenders a sack of seed grain kept aside for spring. Planting hope into barren soil now becomes impossible. The steward smiles with small teeth as he turns the page. Edwin's stomach knots harder than rope. This could have been the end. But Thomas's older brother Will returns from the border wars, limping on a splintered spear haft turned walking stick. He carries stories of slaughtered villages and promises of plunder that never reach the common ranks. The king's banner, he mutters, resembles a butcher's apron when soaked by rain. Will's pay is a single clipped coin and a festering wound. At night, he drinks rough ale, cursing the crown until he vomits blood. No healer will touch him. Soldiers spread sickness and sedition in equal measure. He dies raving about fields of unburied men. Flies claim him before dawn. This could have been the end, but a stranger appears at the edge of the woods, robed like a monk, yet traveling alone. He offers cures brewed from foxglove and bone ash. Claims St. Anthony whispered the recipe in a dream. Desperate mothers trade what little remains, spoons, combs, a wedding ribbon, for vials that sting tongues and numb limbs. Some children rally, others convulse and stiffen. The stranger departs before reckoning, pockets heavy. Edwin watches his cart roll away, wheels printing lies into soft clay. This could have been the end, but the harvest fails outright. Rain falls in sheets, then halts for 6 scorching weeks, cracking earth like old pottery. Sprouting seeds choke. A murrain slithers through the cattle. Bloated carcasses dot the commons, eyes glassed, bellies bloomed. Hunger graduates into famine. Not the sharp pang of skipped meals, but the slow unthreading of muscle from bone. People chew bark, grind acorns, boil belts. Children's bellies rise, skin glossy and tight as drumheads. The reeve orders dead livestock burned. The smoke smells rich, maddening. This could have been the end, but rumor whispers of a miller upriver hoarding flour. A band of peasants, hollow-eyed and bone-gaunt, marches under moonless sky to seize it. Edwin follows, hope flickering like the rushlight he carries. They find shutters barred, doors chained, a single candle flickering behind oiled parchment. Voices beg for mercy. Stones fly. Wood splinters. The miller's son, no older than 8 summers, screams as flames leap from scattered lamp oil. In the red glare, Edwin sees his own face reflected in the boy's terror. Flour turns to ash, hope to guilt. They flee before dawn, hands empty, souls heavier than before. This could have been the end. But the Lord's guards raid the village at sunrise, hunting the culprits. Iron-shod boots trample seedlings. Blades flash to prove loyalty. Will's widow is dragged to the stocks for encouraging unrest. She spits blood where teeth once were. Edwin, lashed across the back, counts each stripe to stay conscious while the steward proclaims justice served. The crowd watches, heads bowed. knowing their silence buys one more breath. This could have been the end. But a preacher arrives, ragged yet radiant, declaring that heaven belongs to the meek and earth to those who seize it. He speaks of a promised commons, fields tilled for all, lords toppled like rotten oaks. His words ignite thirst deeper than hunger, the idea of enough. Peasants gather at night, whisper vows. Edwin listens, torn between fear and the pulse of new purpose. They plan to quit the manor at Michaelmas, walk to free cities where wages are paid in coin, not bruises. This could have been the end, but flight fails. The bailiff rides them down on the King's Road, hooves pounding like drums of doom. Chain-linked man-catchers snap around necks, yanking bodies to mud. 2 youths are branded on the cheek with the Lord's crest, a lily transmuted into a scar. A girl of 15 loses an ear for raising a stick against a mailed rider. Edwin escapes into a ditch, breath held beneath stagnant water, leeches kissing his skin. He watches friends hauled back, limbs limp as slaughtered hares. Freedom recedes beyond the horizon, a mirage broken by iron and decree. This could have been the end. But winter rides in early, astride winds that flay. Soot-covered snow drifts through holes in the thatch, blanketing the rushes where Edwin's sister Mary coughs herself threadbare. Bread ration drops to a slice no thicker than a thumbnail. Edwin mixes sawdust into dough to stretch it. Splinters lacerate gums, but chewing feels like defiance. Mary's breath rattles softer each dusk. One morning, she simply does not wake. Edwin folds her hands, too light now to stay crossed, and carries her to the churchyard. Graves crowd like teeth in a skull. The ground, frozen solid, refuses the spade. Bodies stack in the charnel pit. Prayers abbreviated to make room for more. This could have been the end. But the Lord announces a feast to honor his newborn heir. Musicians pipe reels that drift downwind to huts where silence has become law. Fireworks arc above the manor, dragons of flame on black sky, while villagers gnaw rinds, pulse quickening at each distant burst. Edwin feels celebration vibrate through empty ribcage like mockery. He grips the lintel until splinters embed, grateful for pain that is real, immediate, his own. This could have been the end. But dregs of revolt stir again. A blacksmith named Jonah forges pikes from broken plowshares, preaching that suffering without answer offends God. He invokes ancient charters none have seen. At a midnight gathering by the ruined mill, vows resurface. Edwin raises a hand, half willing, half terrified. The plan: seize the grain tithe at Lammas, distribute bread before soldiers are summoned. They march at dawn through fog thick as wool. The tithe barn looms, doors unbarred by inside sympathizers. Sacks of grain tower like miracles. For a heartbeat, hope feels tangible, warm. Then arrows hiss from the hayloft. The steward had listened, had waited. Jonah drops first, neck spouting red. Others follow, thrashing among spilled kernels. Edwin drags a bleeding girl behind barrels, her breath bubbling. Grain soaks red, feast turned massacre. Survivors scatter into woods, chased by dogs trained on the scent of panic. This could have been the end. But reprisal runs swift. 20 names nailed to the church door. Edwin's among them. He hides in a peat bog, mud-swallowing scent, cold gnawing marrow. Dragnet patrols sweep every lane. Those captured hang from gibbets at crossroad forks, bodies creaking in wind, a choir of warning. Crows perch, patient jurors. Edwin watches from thicket, stomach twisting between hunger and dread. Each swinging corpse could be his past or his future. This could have been the end, but an early thaw frees the river, floods fields, erodes graves, coffins surface, bobbing like grotesque ships. Disease follows water. A sweating sickness fells strong men within hours. Headache, red flush, sudden collapse. Edwin's father succumbs while hauling stones to reinforce a levee. He slumps, exhales once, eyes fixed on nothing. Edwin kneels, cannot summon tears. Salt left his body seasons ago. He drags the corpse to higher ground, stacks stones in lieu of tomb. He marks the cairn with his father's worn hoe, iron blade glinting like a last word none will read. This could have been the end. But the manor summons conscripts for another war, promising pardons for past rebellion. Edwin, gaunt yet sinewed by toil, is taken. Shackled to a column of fugitives, he marches south through rain that peels skin. Rations consist of weevil-riddled biscuit and rancid fat. Along the road, he glimpses gibbeted deserters, tongues swollen black. Officers swear glory awaits. Soldiers mutter that only maggots wait. Nightly Edwin fingers the parchment scrap hidden near his heart. The word bread smeared by sweat. Reminder of a vow never tasted. This could have been the end, but the convoy nears a city stricken by plague. Gates bar shut, torches blaze atop walls, arrows notch in warning. The captain orders camp beside a ditch where corpse smoke drifts. Sentries post, restless. During night's hollowest hour, lightning forks, ignites a munitions cart. Chaos blooms. Chains spark. Prisoners scatter. Edwin slips through a breach beneath burning canvas, sprints into woods, lungs aflame. Behind him screams weave with thunder, iron tang of blood thick on air. Escape tastes like smoke and raw fear. Freedom's price unfolds unseen, yet any path away from shackles feels holy. This could have been the end, but dawn reveals cost. Edwin's ankle twisted, swollen purple, pulse drumming pain. He limps until he finds an abandoned shepherd's hut. Inside, rotted straw, a cracked bowl, a single turnip shriveled to parchment. He devours it, fibers lodging in throat, then sleeps as rain hammers the roof. Fever creeps under his blanket of stolen rags. Visions swirl. Mary's pock-scarred smile, Jonah's shattered throat, banners burning against starless sky. He wakes shivering, ankle ablaze, but alive. For now. This could have been the end. But the hut's former owner returns. A boy barely 13, cheeks hollow, eyes bright with suspicion. His flock gone, his family buried. He brandishes a rust-flecked knife. Edwin raises empty palms. Words come slow, brittle. They strike a bargain. Share shelter and scant foraged roots. Take turns watching for patrols. The boy's name is Luke. Together, they snare rabbits, suck marrow from bones, stitch moccasins from hide. Hope sprouts again, fragile as frost-kissed clover. This could have been the end. But winter's tail lashes once more, dumping snow heavy as guilt. Luke ventures for firewood, fails to return. Edwin hobbles after, finds tracks ending at a frozen stream where soldier boot prints overlay smaller feet. A scrap of Luke's cloak flutters on a briar, blood crusting the hem. Edwin's howl fractures frosted silence. He knows what uniforms do to runaways too young for the rope. Press gang or plaything. The not knowing is worse than certainty. This could have been the end. But, weeks crawl. Edwin's ankle mends crooked. He follows rumors of a charter town granting refuge for coinless laborers. The road winds through valleys littered with past wars' detritus. Splintered carts, rusted helms, a shrine toppled by some forgotten clash. Each milestone promises deliverance. Each dusk steals another thread of resolve. Hunger staggers beside him, faithful companion. Yet step follows step, because stopping would mean looking back, and back is full of ghosts. This could have been the end, but, and still the story refuses conclusion. Pain stacks upon pain. Losses layer like winter garments, each heavier than the last. Edwin's breath frosts. His heart hammers. His shadow lengthens across mud and memory. Around every corner waits another lash, another plague, another bargain rigged against the desperate. Escape shrinks to a theory, mercy to a myth. Yet his feet continue, carving furrows in the road the way his plow once carved soil. The loop tightens, but it is not yet snapped. This could have been the end, but... And the end remains out of reach, dragging him, dragging us, into whatever darkness lies beyond the next bend. The road delivers Edwin to the walled town just after dusk, when lanterns bloom in windows like captured stars, and the gatekeeper is too cold to question a rag-bound traveler. Inside, streets shimmer with thawing slush and spilled tallow from traders' torches. Edwin pauses beside a stone trough where horses drink warm mash laced with honey. Steam rises from their nostrils. Grooms wrap them in wool cloaks fastened with brass buckles. For a heartbeat, Edwin wonders whether birth was a clerical error that placed him among men instead of beasts. The animals eat sweeter grain, sleep in better stalls, and die with names graven on brass plates. He scratches frost from his sleeve and whispers, half amused, that a mule may live like a noble as long as it has 4 legs. He lodges in a shed behind a tannery, paying rent with 2 nights of scraping hides until his palms weep brine and alum. Dawn brings him to the market square, where civic scribes nail fresh proclamations onto an oak board. He leans close, lips moving to trace words he once practiced in secret. One parchment announces a reduction of city grain tariffs to ease the burden upon loyal subjects. Another sheet, thinner, lists a new hearth tax on migrant laborers, collectible immediately. Edwin smiles without mirth. Relief for citizens, cost for strangers. Mercy, it seems, is a ledger written on both sides and shown only to those who already balance. Across the square, a pastry cart does brisk trade. Coins clink. Sugar flakes drift like first snow from pastries pressed into gloved hands. Edwin's stomach claws. The pastry maker's mastiff lounges by the cart, coat brushed to a mahogany shine, jowls flecked with butter crumbs that fall faster than any tithe. Edwin notes the dog's collar. Red leather, polished brass buckle, the metal worth more than his lifetime of earnings. Somewhere, a clerk is drafting inventory for such collars, entering costs under necessary keep of guard animals. Edwin pictures the same clerk valuing a peasant's life at a fraction of a brace of hounds. Absurdity tastes like cinnamon on the morning air. A week later, he secures work repairing the cloister roof of St. Bartram's Abbey. Payment: 2 farthings a day, and the promise of a loaf at week's end. From the rooftop, he sees monks feeding leftover barley loaf to pigeons fat as prebendaries. Each crumb flutters downward in a flurry of wings. Below, beggars cup shaking hands for the same mercy, but the birds prevail. They are quieter, require fewer confessions afterward. During noon respite, Edwin sneaks into the chapter library, a vaulted hush smelling of beeswax and leather. He leafs through a cartulary open on a lectern. Columns of figures march down calfskin pages. Levies from manors he once trudged, acre by acre, year by year. A side note, in neat minuscule records, and unusual mortality among young tenants, followed by a cheerful adjustment, remaining families to supply an extra cartload of oats to compensate. Death entered as a negative digit, balanced by the living as a positive obligation. He closes the book gently. Knowledge this clean could flay a conscience. Rain forces the masons indoors, giving Edwin an afternoon among barrels in the ale cellar. The prior, a gaunt man who sniffs every cask for angel's share, asks the newcomer if country folk still cling to old superstitions. Edwin answers with a shrug. The prior chuckles. Peasants, he says, are like vines, in constant need of pruning, else they tangle around the truth. Edwin nods. He has pruned vines before. They bleed a sap that glimmers like tears before drying hard as varnish. Sunday brings pageantry. The bishop processes under a silk canopy borne by clerks whose hands are softer than candle smoke. Acolytes scatter rosemary into puddles, so the prelate's slippers meet only fragrant water. Edwin watches from the crowd's ragged edge. The bishop's rings catch stray light. Gems flare, then wink out, like tiny mocking suns. Beside Edwin, a crone mutters that her grandson died because rosemary poultices could not staunch flux. She spits the herb's name like poison. Soldiers hush her with a glance. Late that night, Edwin dreams of numbers. Columns rise like castle walls. Inside each turret, a child coughs, a widow begs, an old man bends beneath arrears. Quills scratch. The walls grow taller. A final flourish of ink signs every life away. He wakes laughing, startled by the sound. Laughter is a trespass here, but absurdity demands witness. Spring's first thaw reveals contradictions even the town cannot sweep aside. The tannery dumps offal into a ditch behind the guild hall. Maggots writhe thicker than porridge. A day later, heralds announce an ordinance against public impurities, offensive to esteemed visitors. Fines double for anyone caught emptying a nightjar onto the lane. Edwin wipes tanning grease from his arms and considers the hierarchy of filth. Some stenches earn coin, others punishment. He resolves to carry himself like the tannery cart, reeking boldly, invoice in hand. He befriends Margaret, a washerwoman whose back curves in perpetual apology. She leads him to a porch where they can scavenge crusts discarded after merchant's lunch. While they chew, she recounts a miracle from local chronicle. A saint who fed 500 with a single loaf. Edwin gestures toward the overflowing refuse cart and wonders whether modern saints multiply bread by first ensuring the poor cannot reach it, thus preserving the illusion of abundance. Margaret snorts, a sound half laughter, half sob. Absurdity, she says, keeps the tongue sharp when food is dull. The paradox crystallizes on a day of dual processions. At dawn, a wain rumbles through the gate, bearing plague corpses from outer wards, stacked like firewood, burlap across faces. At noon, the Guild of Butchers parades prize ewes decked in garlands, led to the cathedral for St. Luke's blessing of beasts. Sunlight paints fleece gold. Children cheer. A choir sings benedictions over animals that will dine better on their way to slaughter than most humans in the surrounding lanes. Edwin stands between the two rivers of flesh, one silent, one celebrated, and feels the world tilt on an axis of ridiculous grace. That evening he's sent to the priory scriptorium to fetch tiles for the roof. A clerk, mistaking him for a messenger, hands over a packet of receipts. Edwin glimpses headings. Annual expenditure for kennels and falconry. The sum outstrips the winter dole by a factor of 10. He imagines a parchment somewhere else titled Annual Expenditure for Spare Children. The ink line blank, drying. He takes the receipts to a corner candle and reads further. One entry lists velvet pillow for mastiff bitch and whelp, 2 shillings. He smiles, thinking of Mary sleeping on straw that squeaked with every rat footstep. A laugh bubbles, but he swallows it. Irony sharp as that could shred the thin fabric of sanity if voiced aloud. Days later, a parchment circulates in taverns. The king grants tax exemption to lords who supply hawks for his summer hunt. Peasants taken for levy may be ransomed at 3 marks per head, payable by kin. Birds fetch freedom, men fetch coin. Edwin remarks to Margaret that feathers now weigh more than blood. She answers that feathers fly, coin stays. Night brings a hard frost. Edwin shelters under a stone arch near the tanner's vats. Beside him lies a mongrel, curled around a sausage skin. He watches the animal's sides rise, fall, steady and content. Moonlight rims its ribs in silver. The dog sighs, dreaming perhaps of marrow. Edwin envies that sigh. He tucks cloak tighter, murmurs congratulation to the beast for mastering the art of uncomplicated need. Morning finds him summoned by the alderman's bailiff. Roof repairs complete. Laborers dismissed. Payment, a token of thanks, half the promised loaf. The bailiff shrugs. Budget shifted, he says, adjusting a velvet tabard lined with squirrel fur. He gestures northward. Harvest plenty in the shire next door. Go earn fortune there. Edwin pictures the map in the cartulary, debts penciled across counties like spiderweb cracks. Each shire promises plenty until one arrives with an empty bowl. He leaves the town by the same gate that once whispered salvation. Outside, wagons trundle south, creaking beneath barrels of wine, bales of silk. Between wheels, a child scurries on hands and knees, collecting dung for fuel. The wagoner flicks a whip, not to strike the child, but to scatter a stray dog sniffing at the cart. The dog yelps, trots away, tail wagging. The child stays, head down, fingers warm with offal. Edwin's breath fogs. He senses the moment freeze, absurdity cast in frost like a relic. The animal protected, the boy ignored, both clinging to the same filth for different reasons. He walks the verge until daylight drains. Each milestone's inscription counts distance to markets he may never reach. He remembers his father saying, "Soil forgives, but the bookkeeper does not." Now, Edwin sees truth inverted. Ledgers forgive nothing, yet forget everything, burying sin beneath numbers. Soil, at least, will cradle bones when accountants are done. Stars prick the sky. Their indifferent glitter recalls the bishop's rings, cold light beyond reach, yet still admired. Edwin laughs softly. If particles of burning rock can impersonate jewels, why not let a serf impersonate a philosopher? He composes a theorem. In a world where bread is dearer than parchment and dogs dine better than children, either Providence has a vicious sense of humor or the ledgers were copied upside down. He leans on a milestone, entertains the outrageous possibility that both could be true. A breeze carries the distant clamor of feast bells from the town he's left behind. Somewhere, pewter plates overflow. Somewhere else, a ditch yawns for tonight's shivering. He exhales, steam curling like question marks the scribe never wrote. Life, he concludes, must be a joke told by death to keep itself amused. The punchline arrives when you notice the laughter is yours. He shoulders his bundle and sets off again, footprints filling with moonlight, mind humming with the quietest rebellion. To keep walking, to keep breathing, to keep noticing how absurd it all truly is. Tomorrow's storm is already assembling on the horizon, but in this hush before thunder, he permits one last ironic prayer. for the strength to outlive the next explanation that claims all this suffering makes perfect sense. You have walked long enough to meet rumor on the road, a gaunt pilgrim draped in contradictions. One tale says a band of heretics has claimed an old quarry beyond the marsh, building a commune where no man bows to lord or priest. Another claims they roast infants at midnight. You hear both versions in the same breath, delivered by a peddler whose wagging tongue could sell frost to January. He swears these dissenters read scripture in their own words, that they share bread without tallying debt, that a woman leads their prayers. Then, leaning closer, he confides that the bishop's men sharpen blades for a purge. Truth hides somewhere between miracle and bonfire, blinking like an owl caught in torchlight. Curiosity drags you off the king's way, past reeds rattling like gossip. The quarry yawns before dawn, mist pooling in its belly. At a crude gate stands a lookout, a youth with a face unscarred by whip or pox. He greets you without the rehearsed suspicion of villages, offers a crust cracked from a common loaf. No tithe, no oath of fealty, just grain, coarse but real, handed as easily as breath. Your jaw trembles, hunger or gratitude you cannot tell. Around a brushwood fire, women and men sit in a circle, passing a single cup. They debate scripture, but the verses flutter free of Latin shackles, landing in plain words every mouth understands. Someone asks whether creation can belong to anyone if it was given to all. Someone else wonders if charity counts when recorded in ledgers. A third voice says, ledgers bind the soul like chains. Laughter flickers, unsure, like a candle near an open door. For one trembling evening, you taste a future where every stomach counts as equal arithmetic. Yet even here shadows lurk. The quarry walls sweat with secret fear. Patrols, informers, the price of defiance. Steel whispers beyond the tree line. A scarred veteran shows you a cache of spears fashioned from mining drills. Bread, he murmurs, needs teeth to stay on the table. Freedom, then, is a bargain with violence. No escape from cost, only a new currency. You linger 2 nights, help dig drainage ditches, trade a story for a blanket. At dawn of the 3rd day, a horn blares across the marsh. Riders crest the rise, cloaks snapping scarlet. Crossbows glitter. Chaos scatters the circle. You wrench a child behind stone as bolts hiss. Some rebels raise spears. Others raise palms. Blood answers both. You flee through cattails, guilt slapping your heels. Salvation, it seems, arrives wearing 2 faces, one feeding, one killing. You cannot decide which visage is real, or whether both are stitched to the same skull. Later, limp and mud-caked, you reach a Benedictine house perched above Riverbend. Bells toll vespers. A lay brother waves you inside, sits you before a trencher of hot pottage. Oats, leeks, a hint of pork, luxury enough to hush memory. In the refectory candles, halo-tonsured heads, while psalms rise like slow wings. Gratitude quickens your pulse. Then logic whispers questions. Whose fields grew these oats? Whose hands slaughtered that pig? Whose pennies keep wax dripping bright? Outside you glimpsed barns fat with tithe grain, walls stacked 4 stones thick, while villages sag under wattle. Charity, you suspect, is a wheel. Peasants push from below, monks ladle from the rim, and the turning never stops. The brother thanks God for abundance. You wonder if God thanks the plowman whose name no record will spell. After supper, the prior escorts you through the scriptorium. Illuminated margins blaze with lapis blue, vermilion, gold leaf hammered thin as promises. He explains that manuscripts guard wisdom for future generations. You ask, softly, who guards the present? He smiles as though at a child's riddle. Knowledge, he says, is light. Light must be shielded from unworthy eyes, lest they be blinded. Worthiness, apparently, is a lamp with a lock. You trace a painted dragon curling around the capital letter of Deuteronomy, and think of quarry rebels who dared read aloud beneath stars. Flames given, flames taken. You leave before dawn. A porter hands you a heel of yesterday's loaf and a medal bearing St. Lawrence, patron of the poor. He was grilled alive, the porter notes, yet joked mid-torture that the meat was cooking evenly. Martyrdom seasoned with gallows humor, a recipe for sainthood. You pocket the medal, unsure whether to laugh or retch. Miles later, wind keens across a barrow field. Stones thrust like broken teeth from the turf. Rumor labels this place cursed. Scholars insist it is merely ancient. You rest among humps of earth, fingertips grazing lichen. A century ago, maybe 5, somebody laid bones here with rights nobody now speaks. No tithe barns then, no charters, perhaps no bishops, only hunger, fear, hope, the constants tattooed on human marrow. Archaeologists will one day sift these graves, catalog pottery shards, chartware patterns on tibias. They will print journals describing protein deficiency, iron loss, signs of repetitive strain. Numbers will stand where pain once knelt. Excavation is merely accounting with spades. Legends, meanwhile, tell of a white stag that drinks moonlight from the barrow hollows. If glimpsed, it grants a wish, freedom from oath, coin, sorrow. Children whisper the tale beside hearths, thin on fuel. Which version carries more truth? The measurable calcium leached from bones, or the shimmer of antlers no scholar can prove? The question stirs unease. Facts feed the mind. Myths feed the marrow. Both leave the belly empty. Along the road, you meet a tinker who traffics in trifles, pins, mirrors, tiny knives. He offers a silvered glass, so polished the sky doubles inside it. Reflections, he says, are cheap wonders. People pay to see what they already own. He laughs, pockets your coin, teaches you a trick. Angle the mirror to reflect sun into another's eyes, and you may steal a blink worth any purse. Power, then, is sometimes nothing more than light bent the right way. That night, camped under hedgerow, you test the mirror. The moon glints. Your own stare returns. Pupils wide, beard ragged, cheeks carved by famine. Between those eyes flickers doubt as relentless as hunger. Have you become thief, heretic, vagabond, or merely survivor? Each role trades someone else's comfort for your own. You recall the monk's pottage, the rebel's spear, the tinker's glare. Which theft weighs heavier? A spoonful of grain, a verse wrested from Latin, a moment of vision stolen with a shard of glass. Another dawn, another fork in the track. One branch leads toward a coastal town, rumored to pay coin for anyone willing to gut fish till knuckles freeze. The other twists inland to a pilgrimage route, where alms trickle from guilt-laden nobles. Choice glints like that mirror, promise angled by circumstance. Survive today, whatever the cost. Atone tomorrow, if tomorrow comes. You flip St. Lawrence's medal, heads for coast, tails for faith. It lands edge down in mud, refusing verdict. The universe shrugs. You march coastal. Salt wind scalds lungs clean of incense, quarry smoke, tannery stench. Work proves ruthless. Knives slick with entrails, decks slippery with scales, overseers counting buckets, not bodies. Yet each twilight brings a bowl of chowder, thick with fish heads, protein enough to steady hands. One evening, a fellow gutter named Aldred confesses he once served the bishop's kitchen, was whipped for sneaking marrow bones to beggars. Now he fillets tench for export, while priests dine inland on eels glazed in honey. He laughs, wiping gore from his chin. At least here the fish admit they're dead. Storms batter the fleet. Half the catch rots in casks before market. The master deducts waste from wages. Workers grumble, but knives answer louder than tongues. Aldred suggests slipping spoiled barrels overboard, blaming the sea, keeping a fresher share. You weigh the plan. Meager justice or sin. If you refuse, you starve. If you consent, someone inland buys rancid fish, falls sick, perhaps dies. Survival's toll again asks, whose suffering pays your ransom? One night, you dream of white stag antlers cresting black water. They drip starlight into your cupped hands. When you wake, your palms are empty, but the moon mirrors itself in the filleting knife. Reflection, illusion, perhaps omen. Months pass. Muscle returns to limbs, though joints remember peat bog chill. You carve ash handles for spare knives, sell them to crew, stack pennies in a cloth pouch. Enough, maybe, to purchase a strip of land if times turn kind, though times have never learned that trick. Aldred whispers of a ship bound for Flanders, where free towns hire weavers by the dozen. Freedom, again, spelled with wages and walls. Passage costs half your hoard. You hesitate. Coins jingle like shackles. Hoarded too long, they rust into fear. On your last shore, leave a friar preaches outside the tavern, railing that God's mercy outshines gold. He waves a finger at fishermen, warning that ill-gotten gains will weigh like anchor chain in purgatory. Aldred spits and walks on. You linger. The friar's robe is ragged, his sandals fray. He lives the poverty he praises, yet he begs coin to build a hospice for plague orphans. Charity once more asks, whose purse empties to fill whose bowl? You pass him 2 pennies, miserly or momentous, you cannot know. Guilt dulls neither hunger nor doubt. That evening, wind still, you lay out the scrap of parchment you have carried since youth. Bread. Letters faded, yet promise lingers. You place 1 coin atop the word, another beside, weighing dream and obligation. Which path bakes the loaf whole? Staying, leaving, rebelling, conforming. The parchment says nothing. Words are crumbs. Meaning is mouth. You recall bones buried in barrows, monks gilding margins, rebels bleeding in quarries. You picture a ledger giant enough to list every choice. Grain given to birds, grain stolen for rebels, grain taxed to monasteries. Against each act, a second column. Child fed, child whipped, child diseased. Totals never balance. The ink runs until it forms the shape of a question mark, curving back toward the quill. In that restless dark before dawn, you concede what the world has whispered all along. Salvation is a vector, not a destination, pointing whichever way conscience tilts under weight. Freedom from hunger may tether you to guilt. Freedom from guilt may handcuff you to starvation. Light flickers on quarry walls, inside cloisters, across fish decks, all purchased by someone, somewhere, in coin or blood or silence. You rise, pocket half the coins, give half to Aldred for passage, half to the friar for orphans, fraction of a fraction, bargain with uncertainty. Then you shoulder your bundle and step toward the harbor. Maybe the sea will judge less harshly than land. Maybe legends will seep through planks, guiding compass as surely as stars. Maybe archaeology will one day unearth your footprints and argue whether desperation or defiance press them deepest. Wind fills the sails. Gulls wheel. Ropes creak like questions. You taste salt, prayer, fear. Flavors indistinguishable now. Behind you, shore recedes into a haze where monasteries gleam. and quarries bleed, where bread passes from palm to palm, gaining weight in stories. Ahead, water urges possibilities unread by any scribe. You grip the rail, whisper to the waves that survival is a hypothesis no data set can settle, and let the ship decide the next chapter that doubt will write. The ship made landfall one pale morning, its timbers groaning like an old confession. Edwin stepped onto the wharf with pockets light, bones heavier than when he left. He found work hauling salt cod beneath roofs that creaked with gull cries. Years folded in on themselves. Thin pages in a ledger no clerk would ever open. One dusk, he failed to rise from his bunk. Fever paced his ribs, then walked out, leaving silence. A foreman cursed lost labor, wrapped the body in sailcloth, slid it into a trench beyond the tide line. Sand closed like a book no one had planned to write. No wooden cross, no inked name. Only weight, only hush. Centuries drifted. Storms shifted dunes. Harbors silted. Maps forgot the cove. One autumn, a team of archaeologists traced a scatter of pottery shards to an eroded shorebank. They brushed away grains and revealed a partial skeleton curled tight, as if the earth still pressed obligations into its spine. Ribs showed healed fractures. Tibiae bore grooves where malnutrition gnawed calcium away. Between metacarpals lay a coin corroded to a ghost of its former shine, and beside it, a parchment flake, illegible save for one faded word the lab later coaxed to life. Bread. The report listed specimen number, estimated age at death, evidence of repetitive strain, conclusions filed, photos archived, crates sealed. The rest remained sand and sea roar. Construction crews now raise glass towers within earshot of those dunes. Office lights shimmer each dusk, neat rows where workers tap keys that leave no callus. Elevators hum. Coffee steams. Algorithms weigh minutes the way stewards once weighed grain. Outside, a man in a doorway counts coins for a night shelter. A delivery rider pedals against rain that tastes of salt. A crane swings overhead, its shadow passing like a mute sermon. History folds but never seals. Somewhere in a museum drawer, Edwin's bone shares a box with pottery, rusted hook, fragment of sail needle. Visitors walk past display cases of brighter relics, oblivious to the carton-marked coastal trench misc. Yet the marrowless curve of that rib still echoes the strain of a plow, the lift of fish crates, the lash that wrote silence into skin. It hovers just beyond sight, asking nothing, offering only the soft certainty that every comfort stands on a scaffold of forgotten names. Snow falls against the tower glass tonight, each flake a brief white secret. Breath fogs the pain, lingers, fades. A single heartbeat later, screens reactivate, elevators ding, schedules resume. The hush after story feels like this breath on cold glass, visible, fleeting, undeniable. If this story has shifted your sense of the past, right, history is us.